Now that you got a brief introduction about what cell division is and how it is slightly different in prokaryotes as compared to eukaryotes, let us understand why cells need to divide. So, a brief overview response to these questions would be: one, because they cannot grow any larger after a certain point. Two, because cells get damaged and they need to be repaired, and sometimes the damage is too much for the cell to even survive, so the cell dies and new cells have to replace it. And three, that is, the cells reproduce so that their number increases, and on a larger scale this increase in number will actually cause growth in the organism. So let's understand how cells cannot grow any larger can become a problem, and how cells leading to division is actually a solution to this problem. So this is a picture of France in 1900 and in the year 2012. You can compare both the pictures and notice how the same city got more overcrowded as it got urbanized and there were more buildings coming up. That means the number of humans living per unit area in this place increased with time, but the size of the city remained the same. So, which also means that roads, communication built because of higher demands, people needed more space. So, there was no space, the size of the city remained the same. So, I want to use this as an analogy to understand what happens if a city is growing, but the roads, transportation, the resources available for the city remains the same. Let's say, for example, um, the size of Paris expanded from 1900 to 2012, but let's say the gateways to enter and exit France remained the same. Let's say there are four gates in the year 1900, and in the year 2012 also the number of roads and gateways is still four, and the city has expanded. What problem will the people face over here? So obviously, as the population increases, more people will need to commute in and out of the city. More people will need supplies, and if the number of gateways remain the same, then there will be a point of time when the demand of the people will be higher than how much they can actually access, and that will lead to a breakdown and downfall of the city's economy. Now compare this with that of a cell. If cells keep on growing in size, compare the cell size as the size of a city expanding. And let's say that the passage of molecules entering and leaving the cell are the four gates of the city. As the cell size doubles, the passage is still the same. Can you relate what problem the cell will face? Let's say the things that are moving in and out of the cells are very essential for the cell to survive. So after a point of time, the proteins and other materials which move in and out of the cell by diffusion, or hormones which are required as a cell signal for the cell to produce proteins, all these signals entering and receiving will be less, they will get lesser passage than the amount that the cells actually need. Okay. Over here on screen, there is an example of how insulin is a type of protein produced in the cells of a pancreas and is required to control how we absorb glucose from our blood. Now, people with diabetes have problem with their insulin level. Insulin is secreted into our blood from pancreas cell, but before this can happen, the insulin molecule must first diffuse out of the pancreas cell. So now if the insulin is not being able to diffuse out of the pancreas cell, that is in case of a diabetic person, then blood glucose level keeps on going higher because the glucose is no more utilized by other cells. The cells don't receive the signal from insulin. So exactly this kind of problem happens if a cell goes on increasing in size, but its surface, which is the cell membrane, that is the gate. If that is not increased in size, the surface for passage of entry and exit will become smaller than the volume as compared to the volume of the cell or the size of the cell. Let's assume the cell to be a cube. Okay, so the surface area of the cell would be the length times the width and the number of sides times the number of sides of the cell. What is the volume of the cell? The volume of the cell will be length times width times height of the cell. Okay. Now, volume and surface area share a relationship. Okay. With a cell who has sides 1 micrometer, the surface area would be 6 micrometer square. Volume would be 1 micrometer. So the surface area to volume ratio is 6:1. That means a small cell will have lots of surface area for exchange of materials in and out of the cell. So things can reach the cell and things can move out of cell very fast because the volume is small as compared to the surface area. And the ratio of surface area to volume is high. Now look at what's happening in a growing cell. As the cell is growing, the surface area to volume ratio is decreasing. Reason is, yes, surface area is increasing and the volume is also increasing as the cell grows. But the rate at which the surface area is increasing is very low as compared to the rate at which the volume is increasing. Volume is increasing to such a rate that the increase in surface area is not sufficient. That means cells with a larger volume will be able to access materials that they need urgently at a very slow rate because they have lots of volume. So the organelles will need lot of things in large quantities, but the cell surface area is too small and exchange of materials in and out of the cell will be slow. This is a graph showing in the x-axis how surface area and volume increase or decrease when the cell's volume, when the size of the cell increases. Okay, so we notice that the red color squares show that with increase in cell size, the volume of the cell will definitely increase, but the surface area is increasing at a very slow rate. It's increasing, but it's slower than the increase in the volume. In this graph, you are actually noticing x-axis showing the size of the cell and the y-axis is actually showing surface area to volume ratio. As the cell size increases, the cell's surface area to volume ratio keeps decreasing. Okay, this means that larger the cell, smaller will its surface area to volume ratio be. Therefore, amount of materials exchanging through the cell membrane will gradually become lesser and lesser. This calls for a need for the cells to divide rather than becoming larger and larger. So, it is always noticed that rather than one cell enlarging infinitely, it is better to for the cell to divide after a point so that it has more surface area for exchange of materials. In summary, we would then say cells divide because volume of a growing cell increases faster than the surface area. Cells that grow too large no longer have enough surface area to take in nutrients or to remove wastes. Cells that grow too large also take long time to move materials in or out of the cell. So therefore, when a cell is becoming larger and larger, it becomes very inefficient in terms of obtaining materials or getting rid of wastes. Other points are some cells, because of this delay in receiving necessary nutrients or removing waste, some cells may die because of toxicity. Multicellular organisms need to grow and develop, and for that also cells need to divide. So cells not only divide to increase surface area, when they increase surface area, they get more materials or nutrients to use, and therefore they grow in size by increasing the number of cells. At this point, I would request you to rewind, pause, and take notes on the slides wherever you need, and then move on to the next discussion, that is how cells divide. That's all for now. Thank you.